just how good has Zach LaVine been this season. We're going to look at the stats and tell us what they tell us about Zach LaVine's performance in the early part of the 2024-25 season. Then we're also going to look at the rising narrative and kind of battle between Bulls fans over Josh Giddey or Ayo Dosunmu finishing games, and how I think both sides are kind of using one specific stat to try to push their argument when it's a lot deeper than that. We're gonna break some narratives in regards to that. We're also gonna look at how the Chicago Bulls are already basically out of the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes, despite some Bulls fans' desires. And we're gonna preview the game today against the New York Knicks. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content today, y'all. I want to start off talking about Zach LaVine. Start off talking about the good. We're going to get into I love it when there's an argument between Bulls Nation, like when they're going back and forth at it. And one thing I'll say is, like, doing this job, you always see like both sides of things, and sometimes kind of, especially when I'm not necessarily in the conversation, I can see like, hey, y'all both are kind of saying the same things in different ways. So we'll talk about the Josh Giddey argument and how that's starting to pop up in his regard of finishing games or not. But I want to start this off talking about how good Zach LaVine has been this season. Zach LaVine has been nothing short than the most probably refined version of Zach LaVine I think I've ever seen, right? When you just look at how good Zach LaVine has been playing on both sides of the ball, but especially like offensively, right? He is looking back to that 3-level all-star scorer that he had been in previous years. Now, I don't think he's going to be an all-star this year. I don't know if the Bulls win enough games to get him into that conversation. But when you look at it, he is right now killing defenses by scoring at all 3 levels. He's averaging 20 points per game, right? He's doing that on 50% from the field, 40% from three-point range. He's one of only 7 players in the NBA that are averaging those numbers on that efficiency, that are taking at least 5 3-pointers per game, right? Because the volume from 3 is really high. And then when you look at it as well, while I know a lot of people don't necessarily want to see Zach LaVine be a mid-range scorer, but he's also shooting the ball 60% on mid-range buckets to begin the season so far. He's actually in the 91st percentile in those areas. And I know we've made a lot recently about Zach LaVine's play, but it's also the two-way play that Zach LaVine's putting out there on the court. Zach LaVine, I've said it many times before, but he's on the verge of having his first defensive plus season in his career. He just is. There's no way around that. Zach LaVine seems like this, and this is an oversimplification. That's why I gave the numbers first, but I am going to oversimplify here here for a second, is that Zach LaVine is playing winning basketball. And that's one of the biggest things, and been one of the biggest knocks on him right now. When Zach LaVine is on the court, right, which is the averages, teams are averaging scoring 6.9. That's basically 7 points less when he's on the court per 100 possessions. They're also shooting the ball 5% worse from the field overall. Their turnover percentage is gone up. Their offensive rebounding rate is going up pretty well. Is also like that puts Zach LaVine in the 79th percentile as far as points per 100 possessions, as far as the deficit that other teams are at, and in the 88th percentile of effective field goal percentage for opponents' effective field goal percentage. Now, I want to be clear here. This is more than just Zach LaVine, right? It's kind of the lineups and things that you're using Zach LaVine in, but this would be the first season that Zach LaVine is a plus defender in his NBA career. His previous high, right? As far as points per possessions was 0.5, which I guess technically is still a plus defensive season because the teams are averaging less when you're on the court. But then again, he didn't even play that many games last year, so you gotta factor that in as well. But like Zach LaVine, in only 276 minutes so far this season, is playing some of the best basketball that is. And when you look at the differential, it's an 11.5 point differential when Zach LaVine is on the court. He has an expected wins added of 25 wins over that time. The Bulls are also scoring themselves 4.7 points more per possession when he's on the court. Zach LaVine is impacting winning, and he's impacting the positive side of basketball. And was that not one of the biggest questions about Zach LaVine when he was being tore down over the course of this offseason? Whether the Bulls decide to move Zach LaVine or not, it's just good to see that a player that has taken some of the criticism and has really used it to propel, at least at the start of the season, to some of the best basketball we've seen in Zach LaVine's career. And he's already, he's quickly approaching half the minutes he played in the entirety of last season, and he's been really positive in that time. Now, injuries have still been a thing for Zach LaVine. You can't ignore that, right? He's missed, 3 games this season with injury. So for the people that, the teams that are whatever that talk about Zach LaVine's inability to stay on the court, all right, you have that. The contract isn't going to change. The money is the money, right? That's just not going to change. It is what it is until this contract is over. Zach LaVine's going to be paid over $40 million. It is what it is. But when you look at Zach and what he can control on the court, Zach LaVine is also being a better teammate, right? And I think when you see the overall impact from him as well, that's a big part of that also is the fact that Zach LaVine he's keeping his head up about making plays. The turnover percentage, we still got to get underway. He's 16.8 turnover percentage for Zach LaVine so far this season. We need better from Zach in that area. We just do it. It is what it is when it comes down to it. But Zach is playing really, really well right now. And for his usage rate to actually be down, he's actually having the lowest usage rate that he's had in his it's the second lowest in his career, third lowest in his career. So the fact that he's doing this on those type of numbers, it's really good. It's really good. Zach LaVine is in the 91st percentile in points per shot attempt as well, which is crazy to look at. So Zach LaVine is playing really, really good basketball right now individually. Now, of course, lineups and things play into a part of that, but I just wanted to spend some time acknowledging Zach. There was so much time spent over the last offseason and really last year, since even before he went down with injury, over who and what Zach LaVine is. And Zach LaVine is starting to change the narrative around his play. Starting to. You got to see it maintained over a longer period of time for sure. But it seems like Zach LaVine is focused on he wants to win. And he wants to do what it takes to help the team win. And that's the place that Zach LaVine needs to be in. And that's a really good place for him to be mentally. Now we just got to see for it to continue for him and see how that's going to develop. But Zach LaVine has been really freaking good for the Chicago Bulls so far this season. So much so that, if teams are going to get back in on a Zach LaVine deal or whatever that is, or the interest is going to be there for Zach, his play isn't the thing that you can really knock on him anymore. You can knock the injuries, you can knock the contract, but for right now, with what he's doing on the court right now, you can't really knock his play too much. That's just in my opinion. I would love to hear from you guys on this one. How are you feeling about the play of Zach LaVine so far this season? Is it something that has surprised you? Are you not shocked by it? Are you happy to see Zach LaVine going back to being that 3-level efficient scorer that he's been at times before in his career? And I've seen already people try to oversimplify it and be like, oh, it's as simple as DeMar DeRozan's gone. No, that's not. It's not that simple. Now, I will say that it does help in the ball being moved around more. But when you look at what Zach LaVine's doing on the amount of shot attempts he's doing it at, you can't really blame that on DeMar DeRozan. He was getting more shot attempts technically when DeMar was here. And so it's more of a refinement of the game as Zach LaVine. And that's the part that's really interesting because, as I've said before, like at some point, players are kind of who they are as far as their skill level and their player type, right? But they can refine how they go about that. That's the important part about it. They can refine how they go about it and what they do there. And so Zach LaVine averaging 15.5 shots per game. Like you look at the DeMar DeRozan time period, he had more shots than that. He was 19 shots, 17 shots, 18 shots. Last year it was 15 shots, but we know he's dealing with injury in those 23 games. So overall, like Zach LaVine is really playing really good basketball and a refined version of basketball that we just haven't seen from Zach LaVine before. So let me know that. And then also the defensive aspect plays a big part in that as well. But let me know what you guys think on that down below as always. But then I want to get into this next thing. And I know this is going to piss some people off to start this off with. And I hope that everybody can keep an open mind to listen to everything as we go through this conversation. And I wanted to do this because I think part of doing this job, right, sitting on this side of the camera, is that sometimes you have to look at the conversation that's being had in the fan base, and you have to add some color to that, right? And objective color as well to that, right? Like objectivity. I want to be clear here. And I also think Bulls fans are making way more about this than what even Josh Giddey or Ayo Dosunmu would make about this. I think that Josh Giddey and Ayo Dosunmu, what we've seen, are both locked in. Yes, Ayo has said before, yeah, I would absolutely love to start, but it's about me getting the opportunity, which he is getting, right? But I think that fans, and this is something that we do, and it's something that all fans do, so this isn't necessarily like talk shit to anybody or anything like that. But like, we find these angles and these narratives to get into it about her, to try to plant a opinion on, right? And at that point, it really starts becoming more about narrative than fact, right? So there's been a lot of talk recently about Josh Giddey not finishing games and Ayo Dosunmu finishing games. And for the Josh Giddey fans, I think that there's a legitimate argument there that they're trying to make on, hey, well, Josh Giddey with his assists, he can get people involved. He's giving effort defensively, but then you get the stands, right? And I want to make sure that I make the difference between that. In no way am I saying that supporting Josh Giddey is bad. No, in no way am I saying that you want to see more and see Josh Giddey be given more opportunities is bad. Not saying that at all. Before the stands of Josh Giddey, right? And also, listen, Ayo stands as well are just Josh Giddey haters as well. Y'all gonna get y'all time to be talked to as well. But like the Josh Giddey stands that want to look at one specific stat and say, well, his assist and plus minus isn't really a good stat. Plus minus is, when you use it in the sense of one game, it's not a good stat to use. But when you look at the trends over time, that becomes a point differential. That becomes the impact that you have that's on the court. Even I was in a conversation with the Josh Giddey, and I won't say that he's named because I've had really good conversations with him before. Wayne Hold, I think is his name. That was like, well, analytics are so difficult. I was talking to mathematics, and you can't really know. Basketball analytics are very, very simple to understand, especially when you're looking at on-court, off-court. Yes, you want to also look at percentages and differentials and things like that, which is what I try to bring here. We're going to try to paint that argument with the numbers. I'm a numbers guy. We're going to try to paint that argument with the numbers, but you also want to pair it with the eye test, objective eye test, right? You want to pair it with that and with what the box score stats are telling you, right? So it's a combination of using all those three things, which takes, again, a level of objectivity and letting the numbers tell you what the numbers are telling you, rather than you looking for a specific number to support an argument or just to tear down one argument that you don't agree with. So in the sense of the Josh Giddey and Ayo Dosunmu, let's just talk about some realities in it right now, right? So Josh Giddey and Ayo are both averaging right at 28 minutes per game. Josh Giddey's actually averaging more minutes than Ayo at 28.9, whereas Ayo Dosunmu's averaging 28.5 so far on the season, right? And when you look at their numbers, similar numbers. Josh Giddey's averaging 14 points per game, really good. 6 rebounds per game, 7 assists per game. He's doing really good as far as the numbers. That triple-double is coming for Josh Giddey at some point. It's probably going to come in the NBA Cup. You look at Ayo Dosunmu, 10.7 points per game, 41% from the field, which he's really gotten up. Keep in mind, he started the season off with 36%. Still an atrocious 22% shooting from three. Josh Giddey's shooting better three right now, 43%. They're taking almost the same number. Ayo's actually taking one more three than Josh Giddey a game. But Ayo as well off the bench, 4.6 rebounds, four assists per game, right over half a block per game, not yet a steal per game. So they're averaging close, similar numbers. But Josh Giddey throughout the season, again, objectively, is having a more efficient offensive season. He just is. Again, objectively, more efficient offense via what the box score stats tell us. And we'll get into kind of the analytics here after that, right? We're getting a little basketball nerdy. And so while Ayo Dosunmu is having a down offensive season, and by what the box score numbers will tell us is that Josh Giddey is having a better offensive season, it's not as simple as trying to use those numbers to try to indicate a player's impact overall on offense or defense. I want to be clear there, right? The numbers can tell you one thing, that it's not necessarily indicative of exactly what's being done there. So let's look at what the analytics are telling us. And again, I'm going over the objective analytics. We can have a conversation about it. Again, hold your nuts. It's okay, right? You're going to hear some tough things about both players, right? When you look at the differential so far, right now, per 100 possessions, which is, again, a trend, the Chicago Bulls are being outscored by 6.2 points when Josh Giddey's on the court. It just is. It's bad. It's not good, right? You also look at the point differential. He has an overall negative point differential so far in the season of negative 15.8. That's the offensive impact. But then when you flip it to the defensive impact of Josh Giddey, it's a little bit more concerning, right? Outside of just what the Bulls are scoring or not, opponents are scoring 9.6 points per 100 possession more when Josh Giddey's on the court. They're also getting an effective field goal percentage of plus 6.5%. Those both put Josh Giddey in the bottom 10% of the league as far as that. Again, trends are a thing for a reason, right? And so, but he's impacting as far as we're getting more offensive, we're getting more defensive rebounds. The opposing teams aren't rebounding the ball as well when Josh Giddey's on the court because of his rebounding prowess, those type of things. Josh Giddey's also not really getting to the free throw line a whole hell of a lot yet, but that's not really his game. It is what it is there. I would like to see him get to the free throw line more and hit it at a better percentage. let's look at Ayo, right? Keep in mind the differential. The differential when Josh Giddey's on the court is 15.8, and the points per 100 possessions is negative 6.2 when Josh Giddey's on the court. Let's flip that and look at Ayo Dosunmu. The point differential for him is negative 13 so far in the season. And the points per 100 possessions is negative 1 less, meaning that while the differential has been the same, the Bulls are still scoring more points typically when Ayo Dosunmu's on the court. And I think that comes down to the position they're able to get in because of Ayo Dosunmu's defense. That's where the difference is big time for these players, but it's still not positive yet. Ayo Dosunmu's not having a positive impact defensively yet as far as overall, right? He's having some really good defensive moments, some really good defensive stretches, some really good defensive possessions he's having, right? But when he's on the court, teams are still scoring 12.1 points per 100 possessions more when Ayo's on the court than when he's not on the court. They're also shooting an effective field goal shooting percentage of 3.3 more when Ayo's on the court. What does that mean? That Ayo Dosunmu's defense has been better, but it's not been as better as what I even expected coming into this. It's been better, but when you look at it, teams are scoring more when Ayo Dosunmu's on the court than when Josh Giddey's on the court, right? Again, per averages, he's playing with the bench unit as well. He was in some starting lineups that were weird, things like that. But then let's flip it and look at the lineups. How many plus lineups is Ayo Dosunmu a part of versus how many plus lineups is Josh Giddey a part of? And again, we shouldn't even really be having an Ayo versus Josh Giddey conversation. We should be having a conversation on how best to utilize these players, right? But when you look at it right now, as far as point differential, Josh Giddey is part of 4 or 5 plus lineups, and those lineups have ranged between 3 possessions in total to 4 possessions in total. When you look at the most lineups that Josh Giddey's played in, and again, this isn't a fault of Josh Giddey, but he's played the most in 2 lineups. 238 possessions with the starting lineup of Coby White, Zach LaVine, P. Will, Nikola Vucevic, and Josh Giddey. We've talked heavily about that. It's the Bulls' worst lineup by far, and that is a negative lineup. Then the second most lineup that Josh Giddey's a part of is with him, Coby White, Ayo, P. Will, and Nikola Vucevic. That lineup also is being outscored by 44 points, and it's just not a good lineup. It's not good, right? And then the first time that you'll run into a positive lineup for Josh Giddey is him, Ayo, Zach LaVine, P. Will, and Nikola Vucevic. That lineup is actually plus 18 on the court and scores 112 points per 100 possessions. They also have an effective field goal shooting percentage of 60%. You flip that and look at the opponents, right? This is another thing. Opponents right now are scoring only 93 points per 100 possessions when that lineup's on the court. And this is why I want to have this conversation. Because what is that saying? Is that rather than us having the conversation and argument as a fan base between Ayo Dosunmu and Josh Giddey, it's actually telling us that Ayo and Josh Giddey have been better when they're on the court together. And that is why I wanted to have this conversation, not to like front run or anything like that or to shame Chicago Bulls fans, but it's that we are having an argument as a fan base that we should actually be making the argument of these guys should be playing together. Now, I will say this, Ayo Dosunmu's best lineup, he's played 57 possessions that's with him, Coby, Zach LaVine, P. Will, and Nikola Vucevic. That's basically our starting backcourt last year of Coby White and Ayo, and then having Zach LaVine in there instead of DeMar DeRozan. That has a point differential of plus 21, and they're scoring 133 points per 100 possessions and a 65% effective field goal shooting percentage. And oh, by the way, they're holding opponents to only 111 points per game. So again, the conversation shouldn't be about these one guy versus the other. It should be about, are we maximizing and utilizing these guys right now? I know I'm probably going to start a whole nother argument because now people are going to hear that and say, well, Haize, does that mean that Ayo should be starting over Coby or that Ayo should be starting over Josh Giddey and that backcourt should be our side? We'll see how the trends go on that, right? And I said it before, Billy Donovan isn't making, I don't think, a change to the lineup anytime soon, but I think that this argument that Giddey stands are having, because there's no problem with being a fan of somebody, are trying to overlook Josh Giddey's defensive shortcomings. And I think that Ayo Dosunmu or Josh Giddey haters, because I don't think it's Ayo Dosunmu stands, right? But I think it's Josh Giddey haters that are trying to overlook as well as Ayo's shooting variance. The variance that Ayo Dosunmu's shooting right now is shooting Bulls in and out of possessions. It just is. He hasn't been an effective shooter so far this season. It's trending in the right way. So I think overall, and again, this is another thing that I hold more to Billy Donovan, Billy is not utilizing lineups that are actually working the right way. We're seeing it. You keep the starting lineup the same. Having Ayo Dosunmu in there with either Coby or Josh Giddey is making a better lineup overall than and maybe I'm starting another problem there than Kobe and Josh Giddey. Now, Kobe's still getting his numbers, and I'm not saying that this is not to knock any other player, but it's about how you stagger those lineups. Your starters are your starters. If you're going to start them, fine. But you got to find a way to balance it out and find a way to use your best lineups to their strength, and that's where Billy Donovan is falling short as a head coach of the Chicago Bulls. So I just wanted to have this conversation because I see a lot of arguments being done in the comments here and over on Locked on Bulls about this. And like I said, I think that the Josh Giddey stands are ignoring some things, and the Josh Giddey haters are also willingly ignoring some of the things that Josh Giddey brings to this team as far as the pace, him helping dictate pace, him getting the Bulls extra possessions with his defensive rebounding. The passing that is, Josh Giddey is one of the reasons that Nikola Vucevic is having such a good season, because we know our guards don't always find Nikola Vucevic well. We don't always make entry passes well. You know what Josh Giddey's doing extremely well? The entry passes. So it's about finding the right lineups for these guys. And I know neither one is perfect. People are going to make the conversation of, oh, well, Josh Giddey's defense. Well, guess what? When he's out there on the court with Ayo Dosunmu, we're actually seeing that Ayo's defense is helping overcome it, and Josh Giddey's passing is helping Ayo get easier shots. It's just something to look at. Again, don't shoot the messenger. I'm not on either side of this argument. I'm the objective party trying to add color and a perspective that I think some people are missing in regards to this conversation. All right, let's move off of that. I want to talk about this conversation real quick, is that a lot of Bulls fans are having the hopes that the Bulls are going to be in the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes. And so far through the season, they're not. And it doesn't seem like they're going to be right now, right? The Chicago Bulls, per right now, when you look at the analytics, right now, if the season were to finish, they would not be keeping their top 10 pick. And that's a problem for a lot of people, and I think that's a problem for me right now. We have the 10th worst record in the league for sure. We're at 4-7 right now. But when you look at the odds right now, the Wizards, the Jazz, the Raptors, the Trailblazers, the Pelicans, the Pistons, the Hornets, the Nets, the Hawks. These are teams that all right now kind of have a better chance than the Chicago Bulls. And of course, you got teams like Philly and Milwaukee. I'm not really leaving them in there. But if you are one of the fans that were hoping that keeping the race for the flag was the thing that the Bulls were really hoping to do here, it seems like right now the Bulls are still going to find themselves on the outside looking in the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes. But that's something that we all expected. Now, let's be clear here. In keeping your top 10 pick, you can do that without necessarily having a chance at Cooper Flagg. And that's where the difference is, right? But the Bulls fans, and again, sometimes you just got to debunk narratives. The Bulls right now are not going to have a chance at getting Cooper Flagg. I mean, technically it's a lottery, so they do have some chance in the sense of it just being a lottery, right? And so I guess everybody has a chance in a sense like that. But I think overall, like, the Bulls keeping their top 10 pick is a big possibility. The Bulls getting Cooper Flagg is a very, 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 very small chance as of things go right now. And the Bulls are still looking to compete. Now, you could very well look at it and say this is that, hey, but we heard that after 35 games, the Bulls could be looking to move a lot of these pieces, and that could be very well. Now, the Bulls do have a solid chance enough at a top 4 pick, right? They're right now set at a 20% chance at a top 4 pick. But I think more importantly right now is that can the Bulls keep, if they're not going to be able to win the amount of games needed to make the playoffs, they need to maintain the chance to keep the pick. And keeping the pick, it's looking solid. Getting Cooper Flagg, the Bulls would need the basketball gods to look very favorably upon them to have a chance to really draft Cooper Flagg. And, we'll see how this grows and trends over the course of the season as well, but just something interesting to watch. All right, let's get into the last topic today. The Bulls take on the New York Knicks today. Jalen Smith is already listed as questionable. LaVine is listed as probable. There's also some question around Jalen Brunson's ability to play in this game after what happened last night against the Philadelphia 76ers in the NBA Cup. The Knicks are coming into this game averaging 114 points per game, and they're the 4th best shooting team in the league per percentage overall from the field, right? They're making 13 threes per game. They're taking 34 threes per game in that time, and they're the 7th best defensive team per points allowed per game. Now, what do the Bulls need to do to find success in this game? It's the same thing they need to do every game. Rebound the ball, limit turnovers, play as a team, move without the ball, be engaged, be locked in, give effort and efficiency. That's what the Bulls need to do in this game today. Can they do it? That's the big question for this team, right? A big question for this team because we've seen the good and the bad with it. Now, I think that this New York Knicks team is a team that right now is still finding their footing as well on the season, right? They haven't been necessarily playing the best. They're at 500 over the course of this year so far. They are beating their opponents by average differential of 4.1. So you got to look at that. The Bulls right now have a negative 5.6 differential. So the Bulls are still, fighting an upward battle when it comes to that. We're allowing 120 points per game. That's just not good. We got to be better about that. So this is a game where hopefully the Bulls come in this prepared, because this is a winnable game. I'm not saying the Bulls should be favored, but this is a winnable game for the Chicago Bulls. They just got to be locked in and they got to execute. And let's hope that we see a little bit more of that than what we've seen, throughout the entirety of games. We are in New York. We're on the road for the next two games. We don't play at home again till the 17th against the Houston Rockets. No, I'm sorry. Against the Houston Rockets on the 17th. Almost got a cross-eyed looking at too many numbers. So, we'll see what happens with that. Overall, excited for this game. We'll be live on the channel. Make sure you guys stay in tune with us. But otherwise, thank you for your time today. Make sure you guys are following this channel at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, man, love you guys. Go Bulls. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.